so much for tuning in. You know, I love y'all out there, Omi homies. If you want to join the Omi homies text list, text me at 202-918-4483. For now, it is me actually answering, but it's becoming a lot of y'all. So at some point, I'm gonna have a team join me. But for now, you are actually texting me 202-918-4483. Hit me up. Let me know about what you think about the show. I'm gonna be sending out where to get Suzette's book so you can get it directly. Joining me today, if you're just tuning in, I don't know where you've been. You should have been here. Okay, where you been at? But I am talking to Suzette Yasmin Robotham today, and she is a tech executive with many talents, but currently the author of Beyond Titles, Fearlessly Leading as Your Authentic Self. And we're talking about what does that mean. You know, we were just before the break talking about an instance that you shared where what you mean by showing up as your authentic self with the leader that you encountered. Now you've worked across a few different companies, and so and they have so they're so different. Like when I hear you talk about like working at in tech in education reform versus like at Google versus like at Meta, especially like Google is a different kind of environment too. I used to work. I used to do some deep contract work at Google, and so they gave us like access that they hadn't given contractors, and so like I was deeply a Googler at that point.
Yes. Listen, classic Google too. Listen,
it is a very interesting place, and in a lot of ways it informed my leadership. But I'm curious for you, like going to these different environments, some that may be a little bit more conservative, some that may be a little bit seemingly at least liberal, in the ways that you're able to communicate and talk and be your authentic self. How do you hold true to you being that person while facing so many different versions of leadership and so many different environments and so many different employees of people that you have to lead?
One, I think that's a phenomenal question, right? Because it actually does start with you. I think a lot of times we want to like put the responsibility in the wrong for how we lead and how we show up on the external environment. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm still Suzette in every single environment. And so it's how do I show up as the best leader for myself, for my teams, and ultimately, right, for whatever it is that I'm driving in those spaces, right? And I think for me, I always show up, and I know people joke about this, but with a beginner's mind. I am curious. I've been an explorer my whole life. Ask my mom about sticking my finger in the electric socket and having to go to the hospital, right? But like leaning in with a curiosity and an appetite of
like a mother's nightmare.
Yes, I was it. I was it. But I have always started with, right, a beginner's mindset with a curiosity, and will be a lifelong learner and have leaned into constant learning, right? Because I think in going and navigating any new space, you pause and do a landscape analysis and assess like what is the environment? How do people communicate? What is rewarded? What is the opportunity at hand? What is important to the business, right? I think a lot of times we just are so excited, right? And especially as if I honor, first gens, a lot of us are the very first person in our families to have reached kind of that level of leadership or to have had that opportunity. And so we're just excited to be there, right? But like, you're there because you're talented. You're there because you have a gift. You're there because you have value. And how you add value is by understanding, right, what your actual value add is, right? And I think what the number one most annoying thing about any new leader is the person that comes in and is like, you need to change all this.
OMG.
You hate that boss immediately.
I just hired and let go of 2 people that did exactly that. And the number one rule of leadership is do no harm. Like you're not coming in there to shift everything immediately. That takes time. You need to observe. You need to be curiosity is one of the most underrated tools that we all have and all can activate. Is just literally like just being curious.
Absolutely.
So super important.
Absolutely. Right. And I think you can't lean into a space of your authenticity not being clear on where you're at. Right? Like you're going to send yourself automatically into survival mode because you're going to create conditions where you haven't leaned into self-awareness. You haven't leaned into discernment. You haven't leaned into intentionality because you're trying too hard to be the leader that you think that the space needs versus the leader the space actually needs, right?
You know what? Let's stay right there. Because so what I was thinking and where I was gonna go is I know for sure because I've had them call in when I was doing a live show. There's people out there who are gritting their teeth every day going into some of these jobs. They're seeing people promoted over them. They are seemingly feeling punished for speaking up in any kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
They are they are feeling like anxiety and angst inside of like I want to be, I want to say what I want to say, or I want to figure out the balance of like how I have my voice be heard. But there's something to being the leader that the moment is calling for
Right.
that intersects with this how to assert. It's not a matter of not being assertive or not speaking
Right.
up or not having to. It is a matter of how to assert to get the result.
It's how do you influence, right? A
How
lot of people do not understand
I
the
like that.
art of influencing, right? And so as I think about myself stylistically, going back to curiosity, I will guide people to the decision that I need through curiosity, right? So you ask questions. So when we
Mm.
are picking XYZ direction, what are the opportunities there? Oh, they're not opportunities. So what are the other options? Okay, which are these are the best option? This is the best option. Like you have to know, right? Like at the end of the day, work still. It's funny. And one of my panel conversations, someone's like, "What is the most shocking thing about people? What is the most shocking thing about leadership?" And I was like, "You have to lead humans." Right? And people are coming to work with a whole host of experiences.
Lord,
They come
please.
into work having managed kids before they start. You got people managing something I abhor, imposter syndrome. The number one surprise is like people leadership means you're leading humans. And that then requires that we have a better understanding of the relationships and the things that are going to get people to move to action, right? And so, for instance, when I was working with sales leaders, do you know how I got and invested my sales leaders? I attached, especially when I was doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work, I attached the reality of their world, which was sales, to numbers. The Black community, right, at the time, $3 trillion in spending opportunity, by not designing, you know, a strategy that was tapping into the economic opportunity there. It's the gap between us and our market cap. And somebody might be like, oh, but again, you have to speak in a language where it serves your purpose, but you're actually tying it to
Mm.
what somebody's perspective and experience is. And when we're at work, what the bottom line is. And market cap for a lot of people is the bottom line. So how do you wed the two for people to have a better understanding of it? And right, like doing it from a lens of like you're still honoring like the, you know, the things that are like your discernment, your self-awareness, your self-trust, but also acknowledging that like communication doesn't happen one way, right? Like how do you actually communicate in a way that is effective in getting to the bottom line and outcomes?
Yeah. When you say it's important that you communicate in a way that serves your purpose, I think that's so interesting because the first thing that came to me is does anger and angst serve a purpose?
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, I don't know that people always take time to think about their purpose in communicating at all.
Right. So, and I love that distinction because people will say that they're being direct, but you're not. To your point, it's emotion in it. And if you
Hmm.
can detach the feeling from the moment and communicate, it's different than I went off on this person in a meeting, right? And here's the thing, right? Again, because we are all coming to work as humans, I'm not saying that you don't have a right to feel anxiety. I'm not saying that you
Yeah.
don't have a right to feel upset that someone couldn't hear you. I'm not saying that these environments are actually the inclusive places that we can go and thrive and always be ourselves. What I'm saying is, right, on the other side of this, and in my, so the book actually is born from my TEDx talk that I did in 2015 that was based on the Deloitte data around covering in the workplace. Step 5 of my, like, how do you show up as your most authentic self at work is if an environment is not healthy for you, if an environment is causing you to diminish yourself so much so that you're coming with layers of armor on every single day, is that the right environment for you? Right? And your body will tell you before anything else that you're not in the right environment. And so if,
Mhm.
again, it's, as I look at even right now where we're at, I'll take mine as a blessing, but I am unfortunately one of the 600,000 plus Black women that was laid off in between, the beginning of 2025 and now into 2026. God has created a space for me to be able to focus on my book in a way that I wouldn't have, because I would have tried to, outperform and still show that I could do both. But the thing that I have heard from a lot of our sisters that are in this space right now is, this is the first time I've had an opportunity to honor that I haven't rested. This is the first time
Mhm.
I have relaxed my nervous system. This is the first time that I've been able to breathe in years, right? And it doesn't make what's happening in the job market right, but I think what it needs to be is a change in our approach to how we look at work and how we look at career and how we look at environments and how they do and don't support us. And if the environment is not supportive of you because you've gone through the steps of, the curiosity and the discernment and the self-awareness and really trying to understand, then that's not the environment for you. And I think we have to be okay with saying, this is not the job that I need to be at.
Yeah, 100%. So, okay, so this is a great segue into my next question. When you are there and you've amassed these titles,
Mm-hmm.
you done all this hard work. You're the chief executive of boop 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 bop bop,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that is a pride thing. You've won awards under that title. You have, people know you under that title. People, it's like, yes, you walk into the room and it's, you are the head of and that's how we approach you. That's how we talk to you. How, like, the first part of the title of your book is beyond titles,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm like, how do you, what is there a development process for people to actually, get beyond those? Because we get to a point where we're like, this is my worth, this is my ability, this is my cap, this is my who I am. And if I'm the, you walk in, you respect, put some respect on my name, like. And shoot, when you're doing that, when it's a big company like a
Mm-hmm.
Meta or a Google, people really have like a whole nother layer of how they think about themselves at that point. And honestly, rightfully so, in a sense that, like, I'm not saying don't be mean to people, but you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, rightfully so, you did the work, you are the executive, we should be respecting that. But like, what is that step after? How do you get beyond the title?
So
Well,
the first,
first, by the book. Okay,
well, first
so
by the book,
number one is you
by the
put
book, because I will help you through that process. But honestly, it goes back to that step that I just talked about, is about the reframe around the who I am in this workplace, right? And like really assessing your values, your purpose, your worth, your why, and stepping into these spaces. Because I think the reality is, in this market presently, although somebody would argue the market in 2008 was showing it as well, but this is the first time that we're seeing at volume, for instance, this level of disruption in tech in terms of the workforce, right? And if we honor, I want to talk macro for a second, right? Because I don't personalize my layoff. Companies, especially after the pandemic, were rewarded for growth for the sake of growth, right? And so I've been in growth organizations for most of my career, but in tech, at Google, 40,000, left at over 100,000 people 5 years later. Started at Meta, 40,000, left a year, 60,000 people, right? All of these organizations growing, growing, growing. And then investors said, actually, it's time for some profit. It's time for, for these margins to tighten. And so you're seeing organizations having to give a return on investment. And the easiest place to get that and the most expensive place to get that is your workforce, right? And so a lot of what we're seeing is shedding of workforces that were not growing from a strategic lens, but we're growing because companies are being rewarded for that. On the other side of that, to get back to your question, right, then it becomes, okay, like I've had this incredible journey where I've been growing and getting these titles, but like at the end of the day, I've asked that person, do you understand? And I'll just say it, plainly, it's not that these companies ain't loyal, but these companies ain't loyal. And
No.
so if an organization, I would ask everybody to pause right now. If your company decided tomorrow that your role no longer existed, it was no longer needed, who would you be? And if you can't answer, I will still be Suzette Yasmin Robotham. If you can't answer, I will still be Omi Bell, incredible founder and woman and mother and friend. Then you have to like reassess your identity and like what you've actually put your value in.
I think that's interesting because this also speaks to like what do we know about ourselves already.
Right.
When I hear that question, my first thought was, I'm a moneymaker. So like if tomorrow I had to shut BGV for whatever reason, I'm hitting these content streets, okay?
Yes.
Like I'm like, look, hey, all my homies out there, y'all got $5. What's up? Like, I'll teach you whatever you need to know. I'll teach you a course. I help you fundraise, whatever. Like,
I'll be right there
I,
with you.
you know what I mean? I'm literally going to what I know, and it's interesting because I was there before.
Right.
That's how I got here. You know, in terms of I was like, I got laid off, and I'm like, I'm never going back to a job
Right.
where anybody can just come in and lay me off. I'm not doing that. So whatever skill I have, from whatever I can figure out,
Right.
I was making stuff with my hands. I rented a TP out in my living room. I was like I was doing whatever I could possibly do to hustle up. But to your point, I could not do that if I didn't first have to deeply visit years before that. Who am I exactly? And what do I trust about myself? There's something
Exactly.
about what you're talking about in a book that I think pulls out some of that shadow work that people need to do. Whereas, like, what do you trust about yourself? That's what you know about yourself. And sometimes circumstances will show you other things about yourself.
Exactly.
But what do you is we always worry about outward trust. Do I trust
Right.
that person? Do I trust that person? Do you trust yourself?
Yep.
What does that look like? So let's get into a little bit. But we got 3 minutes left.
Oh
Okay.
my gosh.
I just
It's
I just
perfect.
want to make sure that we get a little bit into some parts of the book because from what I could tell, it's a like reading and work. Tell us a little about that, about your decision to go that route.
Because it's one thing for me to tell you, right? And I also in ed reform spent years doing workshop facilitation and training school leaders, right? It's one thing for me to tell and it's another for you to do. So it's like I do, you do, we do, but it's not going to be transformational for you living in a book, right? And so it's one thing for me to say, how do you live in this existence where you exist beyond whatever your last title is? Versus you being able to do the work of re-anchoring in your values, re-anchoring in your purpose, re-anchoring in what's important to you. And a title might be important to you, but it's if that title is important to you, getting to the why. And I think a lot of times we haven't done the work of interrogating our why. And so this book helps people to do that deep dive in it. And I do talk explicitly about your why begins with mental health work, right? And doing, I know to some extent right now, depending on access to benefits, having a mental health provider in your life might be, an incredible privilege. But that work and this work of interrogating your why does necessitate that you do some of that deep dive into your history and what you need to heal. And, it's very much a journey, but it's a journey that I want people to feel like they can go on, and I've given them the framework, and it's not an overnight one, but it's one worth investing time in, especially now.
I love that. Well, y'all heard it here. Beyond Titles, Fearlessly Leading as Your Authentic Self by Suzette Yasmin Robotham. Make sure you go get the book wherever you buy books, Barnes& and Noble, Amazon, wherever you buy books. If you
And
join the
it's
text
available
list,
on Audible, so they can get it on
and on
Audible.
Audible. There we go. Are you
Yes.
narrating it?
It was me. So the
I
other
love it.
gotcha, if you're like, what surprised you about writing a book and getting your book published, was I had to audition to read my own book.
Yeah. They actually, it's interesting. We can talk about that offline, but yeah, the process of them quote letting you
Yeah.
read your own book is really interesting. Text me at 202-918-4483 and I will send you the link directly. I'll be sending the link out to all of my Omi homies. But if you happen to hear the show, you didn't hear the titles, or you're driving, you couldn't write it down, whatever the case is, definitely text me 202-918-4483. Also, if you missed it or you missed any part of it, go back and listen on Sirius XM app and the replay, which will happen on Monday night as well. But you want to leave the people with anything? Where can they find you?
I am at www.suzette, SUE, because I'm special, ZETTE, Usually Suzette on all platforms, especially Instagram, but I'm growing a community. There are workbooks on the website, all kinds of information about events. And so we're growing this community of existing beyond titles, and I want to welcome all of you to it.
I love that. Also, if you subscribe to me on YouTube, in the caption, in the description, I'll make sure I put all that information as well. Thank you so much for joining me, Suzette.
Thank
Thank
you for
you
having
out
me.
there, everybody listening. Stay tuned for the next show. I am Omi Bell. You listen to SiriusXM Urban View, where talk empowers and becomes action. I'll see y'all next Sunday.
Hiya.